general or a moral concursus with us as free agents. Here's how I read these notes, but I don't really trust these notes too much. With respect to the world, it seems here that God takes each substance to rest entirely on God for its existence. So in that respect, God alone is sufficient, and there's no need for the thought of a concursus. With respect to the states of the substance, though, here it seems Kant indicates that each previous natural state is by itself sufficient for the effect. So here too, although for an opposite reason, there's no need for the thought of a concursus. Similarly, with respect to our freedom, Kant notes that our absolutely free choice is sufficient in its own realm, in its first decision. So here again, it would seem no literal concursus is to be introduced. But then Kant also, or there's notes that also say that we can't rule out that in some, quote, not in the least conceivable way, God might concur with us here. But what I like about it is that later, a few pages later, just as in the Religion, Kant, or these notes indicate that such special causings, once we start to introduce them, could be multiplied arbitrarily, endlessly, absurdly, and this would lead to the conclusion, quote, what imperfection in such a world, totally irreconcilable with a wise author. I take, and this may be a difference between me and Andrew then, I take this to mean that Kant's saying hypothetically, we might speak of, this was the passage, quote, of a miracle of the moral world, just as, the notes go on to say, we might speak of God's acts of cooperation with occurrences in the sensible world and call these God's miracles in the physical world. But I think that's just a definition, if that's what they would be. It doesn't mean we should really think they're such things. That's just really weird, because he doesn't like God's miracles in the physical world, usually. So rhetorically, all this would imply on my reading that actually we should not go so far as to affirm that such oddities are really possible. This is not to deny, on the other hand, that with respect to other things, there could be something like a concursus, in particular with respect to the complex achievement of the highest good, which is a complex state. There may be a sense in which God could think of ourselves and God, Kant could think of ourselves and God in a kind of concursus, because this highest good is precisely a joint arrangement, requiring free agents fitting properly together with an amenable environment independent of them, and hence whatever is ultimately responsible for that environment must also play a role in making the end possible. So that's kind of a teamwork project. In sum, Kant can, after all, conceive his extremely elaborate theodicycal teleology as not literally miracle involving, because insofar as it's defined by the thought of beings, human, subhuman, and superhuman, that are always ultimately acting in a way that fits together with a fully purposeful set of internally determined laws, there's no assertion of special acts or exceptions imposed on the order of nature in the broadest sense, that is, including our nature, God's nature, and the nature of the physical and moral world on the whole. Last section is just one page if we have a minute. Concluding critical caveat. There remains at least one possible problem here I mentioned today, because it seems to me it could arise even from an eternal Kantian perspective. The problem is that the main reason that Kant seems to prefer Vernunftglaube, if you read the Religion over and over, to the traditional religion of miracles, is that he takes Vernunftglaube alone to appeal to considerations that can be expected to be agreed to, he says, by even the most limited human being, even children. Any religion relying on miracles, however, supposedly fails this test, or you might call it the public condition, because the experience of a miracle directly, or the authentication of one through historical and esoteric means, Kant says, must rely on local and contingent circumstances that cannot be presumed to be in the reach of all rational agents as such. Now, the difficulty, I think, is that Kant himself appears to presume or make use of items that on reflection we now may also understandably come to regard as, in a sense, local, contingent, and esoteric. In particular, we might ask how it is that so many common people and philosophers, before, during, and after Hume's time, have appeared to live a life of healthy and sound understanding without seeing any need to assert or even being able to understand clearly the absolute notions of freedom and morality that Kant and completely orthodox Kantians rely on. So from a non-question begging, but still general common sense standpoint, I think the specific Kantian appeal to absolutely free and absolutely pure causings can appear to be ultimately just about as ad hoc and contingent as the appeal to literal miracles that so disturbs Kant himself. Just as Kant holds that it would be unfair religiously to condemn people who understandably think that they have no access to miracles, a non-Kantian, but someone who's sympathetic to the public condition, which is one of Kant's own principles, might say that it would be morally unfair to condemn people who understandably think they have no access to the demanding prerequisites of Vernunftglaube. Well, I'll leave it at that.